Welcome to CWS Christian Writing and Speaking. I'm your host, Jackie Wilson, and today's guest has worked with high performers, professional athletes, corporate, private, and small business powerhouses, and innovation driven entrepreneurs, helping them master their mindset, increasing their cognitive awareness, achieving peak performance while strategically building a multiple figure business. She walks alongside companies as their concierge, executive performance coach to craft tailored solutions, implement processes, strengthen leadership, enhance culture, and adjust the most daunting performance troubles, resulting in 10-figure success stories and lasting results that grow with time. Some of her most significant wins are helping entrepreneurs raise 1.3 million in 90 minutes after their first session with her. She's helped financial advisors increase their closing rate by 4 million a month and also help investment firms reach 1 billion in revenue. And I love that she says that she loves to strengthen their confidence to increase their impact, influence, and income. Let's welcome to the CWS stage, Miss Elizabeth Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing with people is just absolutely amazing to me. And so some people may be like, well, how did she start getting into this? What led her to this point where she is helping people? What was her background? So, Elizabeth, tell us your story.
Ironically, my background is in television producing.
Wow.
Now I have two masters in psychology. How I got here, it's all God. My childhood sucked like many people. My brother literally tried killing me as a child.
Wow.
And so, needless to say, I had a lot of trauma. Also, most of my family died by the time I was 15. I should have died from an eating disorder. That was a miracle that I was alive. So abuse and trauma and neglect was really a core theme in my childhood. And I don't like sharing, or I don't want to come across as like egotistical, but I was in and out of therapy for like 10 years and I was not getting transformation. In fact, therapists would be like, "Oh my God, you've gone through so much. Let's talk about that." And they were more like amazed at kind of what I had endured and that I had still so much resilience. And I was getting tired of saying the same skit, if you will. Like I was like, I want change, I want transformation. I was sitting in church one day and I felt the nudge of God saying, "Talk to the girl next to you." And I did. And she shared with me that she was getting her master's in positive psychology with a subspecialty in coaching psychology. And I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I like that, God." And the reason I shifted to this point was because I was so tired of struggling with I felt mentally tortured. I just
Mhm.
wanted freedom. I just wanted escape. And therapists weren't really helping me get that transformation. And in my first master's, I came across neuroplasticity and neurobiology and neuroscience and how the brain changes. And this was ironically the same time in my life where I was growing stronger in the Lord. And I was reading all of these books and I was really studying scripture. And I remember one day just like throwing a book down and laughing. And I'm like, "Oh my God, this positive psychology stuff is it's all in the Bible. This is insane." I ended up just being really good at helping people transform. I used myself as the guinea pig, and my professors gave me their overflow, and then the rest kind of became history. And I am really lucky to do something that I love and I have a passion for. But the way I got here was I seeked after the Lord before seeking after a career, and
Mm.
it just kind of naturally happened that way. My last stint in production was actually in South Africa. I was doing a wildlife documentary and I hated production. I didn't like the corruption of Hollywood. Now, obviously, documentaries don't have as much corruption, but I just didn't want to be in it anymore. And really, in my trip in South Africa, I really learned more about God and Jesus and that spirituality and how to have a relationship. And I just always sought after God instead of like chasing money or doing careers. And it just kind of organically fell into this place of now where I get to just help people grow and I get to work with a lot of Christian executives, which always makes me happy because we get to do a little bit more of like Bible study type executive growth where it
Mhm.
really matters, because leaders sometimes forget like you're also supposed to still point people towards Jesus, not just the ethical duties within the company. And it's been exhilarating. Definitely had some hard times, but it's been exhilarating at the same time.
Yeah, I love it. And you mentioned your coaching business, and this is how you help people. In an introduction, I mentioned about how you help them their mindset shift so that they can become these higher performers and really grasp who they are and what they're supposed to be. Can you share a little bit more about your actual business?
Yeah, for sure. So I mainly work with executives. I'm trained as a therapist. I'm trained as a coach. And what the ultimate goal here is to improve your psychology, because everything runs through your psychology. I don't care about your business strategy, because if your psychology is not healthy, your strategy is most likely not being implemented.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have maladaptive thoughts or weird thoughts or disorders or cognitive issues. I mean, the Bible talks about this, right? This is life that we're doing. And Paul makes it really clear in 2 Corinthians 10:5 that we're supposed to take every thought captive and bring it into the obedience of Christ Jesus. Well, that's really what you have to start to learn how to do is start to almost externalize your thoughts, or not really always see them as a part of you, and start to identify like what thoughts might be unhealthy that are driven from either lack of understanding, unprocessed trauma, negative experiences as a child, and really fine tuning your thinking so you can stop limiting yourself, but also stop limiting God. Because I believe the impossible is always made possible when you do life with God, and just learning how to be in that partnership. And then like also making a better impact and influence in the world. People need people. Like we're here to serve each other as well as serving the Lord, right? And you have to be intentional with leading with unconditional love and remembering what really matters. And your bottom line doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's important, like it is a factor, but learning how to just be humble, learning how to forgive. I have the gift of discerning spirits, which has taken me some time to like walk in and accept, but it really obviously helps me in my practice. And one thing that I've learned is bitterness, jealousy, and envy, and the spirit of rejection are 3 spirits that will just limit you. And so a lot of times I work with leaders to help prune out those spirits that they're struggling with, but also how to communicate effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Because communication is not what you say, it's what the listener perceives. And so learning how, and you know, even if you watch or listen to Jesus in the Bible, he's always very careful with his linguistics towards certain people he's speaking to. So you have to learn the audience you're in front of and speak to them, not always just speak about you, and just growing in that awareness and that human psychology so that you can be a better leader in both the home and the professional world.
I love to tell people that we serve a great God and He's put greatness in us. So why are we limiting ourselves? And I would love to hear maybe a story or two about, some of the common issues that you are dealing with among leaders.
I'll tell you big themes. Fear of failure is a huge theme. It typically comes from perfectionism. Right there, perfectionism is a coping mechanism. And so we have to work through like, where did, as a child, a lot of things do go back to the childhood, which
Yeah.
people don't always love, but it is true. A lot of times we develop perfectionism as a coping mechanism from the pain or the torment of a child. And so learning how to break that down and just humble yourself to allow, it's funny, sometimes fear can keep us locked in a cage that we are the ones that have the key to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And learning to shift and see failure is not failing, it's really feedback. It's learning
Hmm.
how to think differently, because Jesus makes us victorious. At the end of the day, if you do life with Christ, you're victorious in everything that you do theoretically, right? But it's learning how to operate in his, and I put this in air quotes, like his laws, if you will, because he's with you. So that failure you're fearing, like how can we overcome that in a way that helps you grow too? And how can you humble yourself? Like a handful of my clients have struggled with the spirit of rejection, and you see that when they have really high autonomy scores and really high recognition scores, right? Like they need human favor, they need to have independence, they need to do what they want to do when they want to do it. Well, that's not how leadership works
No.
at the end of the day, right?
No.
And so one thing that I work with people who are high in autonomy and struggling with the spirit of rejection a little bit more is, how can we, because there's always a level of perfectionism and failure within that usually, but how can we lean into being vulnerable? How can we lean
Mm.
into being human? And how can we accept it if you haven't accepted it, so that you can kind of calm down a little bit? Because one thing I have to remind people, especially if you're task oriented, which I am, so I have to be very mindful of this too, is Jesus never moved a task before people. He was always with
Mm.
the people, and then he did task if he could get to it, if you will. And so how can you calm down and really be with the person that's in front of you, listening to them, encouraging them, helping them understand, taking the time to uplift them, and then shifting to your task later? Because a lot of these leaders are so prone to stress. They actually sometimes don't even know what life without stress is, that we have to start and take a time out and say, okay, well, let's calm down, because this whole like, go, 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 you got to go faster, it's all up to you, is ostracizing God from the picture. And he's not going to help you become holy where you don't want his help. He's just not going to cross those boundaries. He's such a gentleman, right? And so it's like learning to put it all down on the altar, if you will, so that you can grow and become your best self, so that you can be the person that you yearn to be. Or, like a lot of times when I see someone who has high ambition, usually there's like greed secretly in the background of like wanting more money. Also, like identifying like, where are your fleshly or your childhood traumas impeding your ability to lead? Because having the goal of I just want to be rich is really vain, if I can be honest. Like, that's a vain goal at the end of the day. So why do you want to be rich? Do you want to be rich because somebody in your childhood said you suck and you're worth nothing? And then working through that, because a lot of times our self-esteem, a lot of high performers and executives don't have healthy self-esteem. So they attach what they do to their work to validate them, when you have to disconnect it, because your worth is 100%. Even people in jail, even people who've done like the worst things in the world, they're still worthy people. Have they done bad things? Yes, but you have to disconnect those things and help people remember that, like, you don't have to strive. Like, you don't have to carry all of the weight that you think you're carrying at the end of the day. You can put your loads down, if that makes sense. Kind of talked a little all over the place there. So
No, but I love it. And I think it's something that people need to hear. Of course, my favorite line was when you said failure is feedback. And I don't think people look at it that way. They automatically think it's something wrong with me, instead of saying, how can I improve so I can give the people what they actually need?
yeah. I mean, and failure is great at learning. Like, think about darts for a second. I mean, I'm not a professional dart player. Maybe you are. But when you throw a dart and you don't get the result you want, you don't keep throwing the same way. You start to play around with your throw.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we don't fear failure there, but we'll fear failure in the sense of, why didn't it make my quarterly goals? Okay, well, calm down. Some of the most successful companies in America took over a decade to actually bring in a profit.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a long-term goal here that you have to play, and you're going to have to be resilient. Look, faith and business, especially if you own a business, is not for the weak of heart. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. And so you're going to have to learn how to be resilient and persevere and optimistic. And by the way, the more optimistic you are, the more natural it is for you to trust people, which also means the easier it's going to be for you to trust God too. We have science, obviously, nowadays to prove some of this stuff. And I love it when the Bible proves what the science is now proving. It's just so funny to me. But at the end of the day, we know that being optimistic, I like to call it a tough-minded optimist, is one of the best mindsets you can develop, because there's no such thing as adversity. It's just opportunity.
I love it. I love it. Elizabeth, what is next for you?
Oh man, right now I am truly not sure. I'm just taking it day by day. My company is growing, which is exciting, and got some few courses that will be rolling out here in a little bit. And
Any books in the future?
I wrote a book 2 years ago called The Victor Transformation, and it's for people who struggle with a victim mindset or bitterness, and how to defeat that through Christ. It's a lot of the things that I did in my personal life to transform. I had 25 years of my brother truly attempting to kill me in my childhood, and just how, like, I forgive my brother. I hang out with my brother. Like, we're good. He's grown. I've grown. Like, like, nobody's worthy of a forgiveness, which is why we all need to forgive each other, right? But if God puts on a book, then sure. I guess I should say I do have a little ebook coming out that's called Snap Out of Worry, that talks about like actionable steps that you can do to rewire or renew your mind to stop having that habitual thinking of worry, which was so much fun to write and explore.
It sounds exciting. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, ElizabethLewis.com. I'm quite popular on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. And those, I guess my Instagram handle is Elizabeth Lewis, Louis coaching. And I'll be there. I also have a YouTube channel where I teach some of this stuff, and a podcast. All that's on my website, though.
As we wrap up your interview, what is the one thing that you want people to take away from all that you have said? something that they can start implementing into their life today?
I didn't say this, but the best thing I can give someone is learn how to practice acceptance. I actually have an episode on my podcast, The Liz Show, that talks about biblical acceptance and even how Jesus had to practice acceptance because he had to do some things he didn't want to do. But at the end of the day, there's not always a reason to why things happen. And the sooner you can learn how to accept the gray areas of life, the easier it's going to be then for you to focus on only the things that are in your control and let go of the things that are really not in your control. And it helps you just have more of a flourishing life.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. CWS audience, you have heard her. I said earlier that my favorite line that she stated was about failure. And it's not about looking at yourself as a failure, but looking at the opportunities to become more of what people need. But also, I love this at the end, this acceptance. I feel like we need to be more accepting of who we are, who God has created us to be, and be okay in knowing that He's created you for greatness. There's always going to be somebody out there that's going to try to dampen your light, but you go and you be what God has called you to be. You can be like one of these great entrepreneurs that Elizabeth works with. And of course, if you need help and pushing forward in your career, make sure you're connecting with her. But there is so much that is before us if we will step out on faith, let God lead us. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And until next time, beautiful people, God bless.